Hey, hi, hello, welcome back to my channel. Get ready to be disappointed. Today we're going to be talking about my most disappointing books that I read in 2021, and I'm going to be talking about 5 books here. Last week I talked about my 5 worst reads of the year, and next week at some point you're going to be seeing my most surprising books of the year. My favorite books of the year is going to be a completely different format. It's not going to be the 5 books. Through the month of December and January, I will be posting on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, so get really excited about that. Most of these books I didn't necessarily rate super poorly. The way I am defining disappointing is the way that every person in the entire universe has ever defined the word disappointing, which is I thought it was going to be great and it just didn't meet that expectations. Also, none of these were DNFs, so anything that I thought was going to be like superb and then I DNF'd it is not on this list. I'll be talking about my DNFs in another video sometime in January, I believe it is. Let's talk about these books. Please don't come for me. Some of these are going to be more well-loved books. Some of them I think you guys will agree with me on, but overall, we're just here to have a good, fun time, silly, goofy mood, and you know what? It's an opinion, guys. We don't all have to agree. First one up on the list is going to be the most controversial of them all, and that is Red Rising by Pierce Brown, not Pierce Brosnan. He didn't write this book. Sometimes I think he did. Nothing against him, I just get their names mixed up. Red Rising is a sci-fi series about this man who is a miner on Mars. He's a hell diver and he freaking dives the hell. Anyways, he mines on Mars and he is a red, which what can I spoil about this book? He unfortunately joins a resistance movement very early in the book and starts to realize that Mars is actually habitable and that they have been using these people against their own knowledge as slaves, and that they are reds. They are like the bottom of the food chain in this society. Darrow gets out and he kind of decides to rebel even more so against all of the people in the system. Now, I will say with this one, I would like to reread this book. I think part of why I really hated the book so much, because I did hate this one, I have very strong feelings against this book, is mostly to do with the fact that I listened to the audiobook. And I've been thinking that since I read the book, and then rather recently I heard someone's review where they had similar thoughts to me on this book, and they also listened to the audiobook, and they also thought that their negative feelings were because of the audiobook. I don't know if I would ever reread the first part again where he's on the surface of Mars and he is hell diving, because I don't care about that part, but I would like to reread the part where he escapes from there and then continuing on into the other stuff that happens. I'm not going to spoil what happens, because I think on paper I should love this book. There is like a Hunger Games-esque part of the book, and I love Hunger Games. I love 1 and 2 and 3. Like, there's no reason why I should dislike this book as much as I did. Now, some of the things that really made me disappointed in the book and not like meld with it beyond the fact that it was an audiobook was our main character is so fixated on his main thing that he mentions so many times that he is the greatest and the best and the strongest because he has helldiver hands. And I will never forget that word for the rest of my life because he said it so many times. I can't even begin to tell you how many times this freaking man, Darrow, decided to mention the fact that he used to be a helldiver, and because of that, he is strong. I also wasn't a huge fan of how the author decided to break up the society. I felt like it was predictable and that he could have done more with it, and that while this was a reflection of like society's darkest parts, you didn't need to be quite so misogynistic in it. Apologies if everything looks different. My mom called to give a health update because there's some family issues going on that I haven't actually talked about yet on my channel, and it was an emergency phone call and then we talked for a long time. Red Rising, I'd like to retry it one day, but I ended up rating it a 2 out of 5 star, and I'm really disappointed because I kind of thought it was gonna be a 5 out of 5 star. Next up is the book Awakening by Brandon Sanderson. This is a short story, so going into it, I kind of already was suspicious, but Brandon Sanderson has never let me down in a fantasy book yet. I did not enjoy Steelheart, and I did not enjoy Skyward, and I actually DNF'd both of those books, but all of his fantasy stuff has been 4 or 5 stars up until this point, so I thought his short stories would be really good for me too. Now, I don't think that this one was necessarily bad. Like I said, I was just disappointed in it. I believe I ended up rating it either a 2.5 or a 3 out of 5 stars. I just felt really lost and like I wanted to understand things that were happening better than I was understanding them. So this is the story of this culture that believes that there is this God and that I don't know how many years, but every generation there's this one son from this family line that they send off to fight the god, and it's his destiny to kill the god one day. And we pick up right in chapter 1 where the main character had been sent away and he has returned because he successfully killed the god, and now the people don't know what to do with him because they never thought that he would actually succeed. And it's kind of his story coming to grips with what do you do after you've already successfully been the hero in a story and like what comes next. And it also had to do a lot with this RPG game that Brandon Sanderson is really into. And if I had known that, I think I would have treated the book a little bit differently because I thought that this was all purely made up by him, but no, there is like culture behind this book that I had not known about prior to reading this book. So of course I was lost and confused. There's this whole entire other world that I should have learned about before reading it. I just wasn't as in love with it. I think the writing was absolutely fine. Brandon Sanderson is a fantastic writer, and even in the books that I DNF'd with him, it wasn't because of his writing, it was because of other elements that I didn't enjoy. But with this, it really boiled down to I wasn't connecting with the characters because I was with them for such a short time. I thought the concept was really cool, but I was so confused by everything that was happening, and I wanted to know more about the world. One thing that I can definitely say was a plus for this book is it is a sci fantasy, and I am in love with sci fantasy. So it would be one that I would put on the list of books I would recommend to people to check out, but to not maybe have like such high hopes for it as if you're going into Stormlight or Mistborn. Next on the list is The Chosen and the Beautiful. So this is a Great Gatsby retelling, but we are following Jordan Baker the entire time. And this is an Asian American inspired story taking place in 1920s, and it has some fantastical elements. So if you know the story of the Great Gatsby, we are following in the original storyline Nick as he meets this man named Gatsby. Gatsby is in love with Daisy. Daisy is married. There's this whole entire conflict of lost love and war and returning to each other and kind of this idea of like nothing really matters. Now that we're following Jordan, we do get to see a lot different side of the story. We kind of get to see more of the behind the scenes. My biggest issues with this book were that the fantastical elements were not very fantastical, and they really didn't add anything to the story, and they were so far and few that I forgot about them in between them actually happening. There was this one really cool scene where Jordan and Daisy kind of build this like paper girl, and that was really fantastic, but beyond that, the magic had no influence on any parts of the plot. My other big issue was I really wanted to focus more on Jordan. She is part of the LGBTQ plus community in this book, and I wanted to learn way more about her and how her world was different from Gatsby and Daisy's, because we already seen Gatsby and Daisy through The Great Gatsby. So I thought we were going to get a lot more of Jordan's story in this one, but instead it was really just her story watching them. And I wanted just her story, but theirs also happens to be taking place like along side of hers. It wasn't the worst book ever. I was just expecting way more from it. That's the theme of this video. I don't know why I keep repeating it, because you already know that's what I'm going to be thinking about all of these books. I'm going to try to not say that again for the next two. So the next book up is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. So I put this on a list a long time ago for books that I thought I was going to give 5 stars to, because it does have multiple timelines, time travel, all of that stuff. I'll talk about the summary in just a second. But then I ended up reading Recursion for some reason first, and I rated that book 5 stars. I loved Recursion. It made me almost cry. It made me angry. It made me sad. It made me happy. I felt everything. It was so good. So I went into Dark Matter expecting similar emotions, and I just did not connect with the story as well, and I felt let down by it in the end. It felt much more stereotypical, and it just felt like it wasn't as well thought out. I didn't connect with the characters as much, and I, for most of the story, just kind of wanted it to be done. Now, Dark Matter is about a man who wakes up in an alternate universe, and he realizes that in this universe, his wife and son, I believe is a son, don't exist. So it is his story of him trying to get back to them and figure out how this all happened. And it has a lot of alternate universe kind of fun things along with it. Just really, the ending specifically like didn't do it for me, where there's this part where without spoiling anything, all of the different universes kind of overlap each other a little bit in a way. And I remember being on my walk when I was listening to that part, because I was listening to this audiobook, and just feeling let down by that being the conclusion of the story. I ended up rating that one a 3 out of 5. I would recommend it to very specific fans of certain sci-fi genres, but if I had to say that a Blake Crouch book was going to be the one I'm going to recommend, it is going to be Recursion. Finally on this list, we are going to talk about Kingdom of the Cursed, which is the sequel to Kingdom of the Wicked, and that's why this book is on this list. So I ended up rating this book a 2.5 out of 5 stars, but I ended up rating book 1, which is over there, a 4.25 out of 5 stars. I really enjoyed book 1. I felt like for a YA fantasy romance, it surprised me in ways that I wasn't totally expecting. It was darker than a lot of things I had seen before, and I really enjoyed how Carrie Maniscalco took the plot into different directions, and I liked where she went with it. With book 2, I felt like it was just filler. I felt like it didn't develop the plot or the storyline at all. The whole entire main focus of this series is that our main girl Amelia's twin sister has been murdered, and she summons a prince of hell to help find the murderer. And the prince of hell that she summons is Wrath. Now in book 2, we get to see a lot more of hell and where Wrath is from, and so I thought it was going to be a continuation of her working with Wrath to try and solve her twin sister's murder. But her twin sister's murder is really kind of brushed aside for most of this book and just ignored, and a lot of this book is just Amelia kind of finding out about her magic because her and her sister are witches, and it's something you know from the very beginning. The other thing that I wanted to focus on in these books was other princes of hell. I wanted to see Wrath interacting with them. I wanted to see him exploring different areas, or Amelia exploring the different areas, and see how the different elements, the different deadly sins affected her. We really did not get to see much of that in either of the books. We get a little bit of some of the other princes, but they're not there for very long. And when I say not very long, I mean that like 3 of them had 1 chapter each, and that was it. And in book 2, it was even less than that. I did find that I am very interested in a lot of the other princes, and that I would continue on with this series. I just was really disappointed in this book. I think that the whole entire like middle chunk of the book, basically up until the 90% mark, wasn't necessary to this story, and that it could have been told in a lot different of a way. There's this whole entire trial that is the main focus of this book, and where Amelia is going to end up at the end of the book. Without spoiling anything big, she basically has to sacrifice one of her fears for this like ritual thing that's going to be happening, this like holiday thing. The whole entire book is leading up to that, and she's kind of training and practicing and growing in power so that she can be ready for that day. When that day comes, the trial doesn't happen, and something else happens that her magic is good for, and it makes sense that the story was leading up until that. But I don't get why you're going to tell me the whole entire book is leading to one thing just for it to kind of like sidestep slightly. I just think that Carrie Maniscalco could have done a way better job with this. I think that the series could have been a duology, and a lot of this filler could have been just cut out. I also know that this book was supposed to be way more new adult than it was YA, whereas book 1 is a YA fantasy, and I understand where that influence came from. I just don't think that the more adult scenes were done like super well and super effective. I kind of felt like they could have been better. And I do believe that in book 3, I'm going to be a lot more satisfied with them, because in this book, we are kind of still developing our characters together in their romantic relationship, but they're kind of going faster in the physical side than the emotional side. And I wasn't totally caring about the physical side because it just wasn't written in a super compelling way. But I do believe that in book 3, when I have the emotional attachment, if I have the emotional attachment to the physical attachment, then I'm going to care a lot more about what's going on. That's the final book I have on this list. Actually, when I was making this list, was kind of shocked. I came up with a list of 7 books originally that I felt disappointed in and wanted to talk to you guys about, but I didn't have any more than that, and so cutting it down to 5 was not difficult. No matter what I can say about this past year, I can say that I wasn't disappointed in a lot of the books I was reading. Now, let me know down below what your most disappointing read was this year. I appreciate each and every one of you watching. If you are doing any kind of these stats videos for the end of the year, link them down below. I'd love to watch them. And until next time, I don't remember how my outro goes, but I'll talk to you in the comments. Bye!